We'll call the meeting of the Development Committee of DuPage County of November 17th to order, and roll call, please.
Oh, I need the agenda up.
Member Chaplin? Member Chaplin?
Here.
Member Colbert?
Here.
Member Hart?
Here.
Here.
Member Ozog?
Here.
Member Rutledge?
Here.
Chair Tornatori?
Here. And we have a quorum. Chairman's remarks. I will ask at this point for a motion to amend the agenda and pull item 9A, which is a review of executive session minutes and executive session.
So moved, Ozog.
Second, Rutledge.
Motion by member Ozak, seconded by member Rutledge. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Member Chaplin? Member Chaplin? Member Chaplin?
Aye.
Member Colbert?
Aye.
Member Hart?
Aye.
Member Ozog?
Aye.
Member Rutledge?
Aye.
Chair Tornatori?
And the motion carries. Moving on to public comment. Generally, public comment is either in person or via email. However, I know we have some public comment, I believe, in the room. We've also made a consideration to the city of Winfield to have public comment this morning via Zoom. Although it's unusual, we felt it was necessary given the fact they are a municipality. So given that, Eileen, I know you have some public comment in the room?
Yes, we have both email and people.
Okay. Okay. Well, why don't we, you want to go with the Winfield public comment on Zoom first, and then we'll go to the people in the room? Oh, how about that? Okay. And I assume that is you on Eric's iPhone.
That's correct.
Okay. All right. Go ahead, sir.
Okay. Well, hello. I'm Eric Bandy, the village president of Winfield. The village of Winfield provided information to the ZBA outlining the history of the Willow Creek proposal in 2018, the fact that the village has multiple ways to provide water and sewer to the development, the regular nature of the development, and the fact that granting the variance would be a terrible precedent for the county. A cursory review of the information provided by the church showed that they provided false testimony to the ZBA to support their requested variance. The church stated that sewer service is 1.8 miles away and public water is 7 miles away. This is false. Willow Creek of Wheaton was informed that Winfield water and sewer would be about 500 feet north of their development way back in 2018. Another incorrect statement was the church's facts sheet submitted to the ZBA that states that the Winfield Fire Protection District has no comments to the variance petition. This is false. In fact, the district had 5 safety-related concerns that were submitted to the ZBA in August 26, 2020. This leads to an uncomfortable question. If a cursory inspection shows that the church has submitted so many obviously false, misleading statements in their variance request, what other false, misleading statements have they submitted to the ZBA and to your committee? The county ZBA credulously accepted the church's assertion that access to Winfield water and sewer is a hardship when it is merely 500 feet away. Willow Creek's assertion is not reasonable since municipalities routinely get right-of-way for utilities, and there are multiple ways to get utilities to the megachurch. Infrastructure such as water and sewer and lift stations and sewer service are common, and the costs are almost a rounding error compared to the total cost of a multi-million-dollar megachurch development. Approving the variance shifts the cost from a well-to-do megachurch to those who have to pay for municipal utilities. This is highlighted when the church stated that part of their fire safety response is that they'll use a Winfield fire hydrant as part of their safety proposal. This shows why granting the variance is poor public policy and not in the public interest, since it inappropriately shifts costs from those who can pay but choose not to. Remember that utilities are not free, and in this instance, they're just 500 feet away. The ZBA rubber stamped the church's proposal and approved their findings of fact, which is riddled with errors. This calls into the question the ZBA's findings of facts. What other errors are present? if the ZBA missed such obviously false and deceptive information provided by Willow Creek of Wheaton Church. Moreover, the ZBA's findings of fact were flawed, that how can the recommendations to approve the safety-related variance be a reasonable judgment? In conclusion, I encourage the Development Committee to continue the county's reputation for excellence and consider development best practices when you do your review of the mega church variance request. Due to all the irregularities and the bad faith shown by the church, the Village of Winfield asks that the County Development Committee reject the Willow Creek of Wheaton's variance for fire safety-related fire code that would allow well and septic instead of municipal water and sewer. I also submitted a more extensive written comment. I do appreciate the opportunity to address the committee.
Thank you, President Spandy. As of course the members of the committee know, we don't take any additional testimony today, but we certainly appreciate your comment. And we will move on to whatever other public comment you have. Eileen, why don't you do the public comment for people in the room, and then we can do the email public comment, if you would, please.
Okay, first person is Tracy Caston, publicly commenting on Wheaton Winfield Road LLC zoning.
Oh, great.
And just for those who are in the room there, your public comment is limited to 3 minutes per person. Of course, at the beginning of the meeting, any public comment is limited to discussion of testimony that was presented at the Zoning Board of Appeals, and no new testimony or evidence can be presented or will be accepted by this committee. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tracy Casson on behalf of Wheaton Winfield Road LLC. Quick question. The comments by the Mayor Spandy, and I address those after my comment where I'm giving an overview, because obviously they just came in just now.
You can, however, I would ask you to be brief and try to keep it within a somewhat time period, because I do acknowledge that they were significant accusations. So go ahead.
Thank you. I'm Tracy Casson on behalf of Wheaton Winfield Road LLC, who's seeking to construct a permanent church home known as Willow Creek Community Church, Wheaton on Winfield Road. I'll briefly introduce Scott Reed, who's also signed up, and then the lead pastor, and then I'll make my comment, and then introduce Mr. Goodwater, engineer.
Thanks, members of the committee. I just wanted to introduce myself. I'm Scott Reed, campus pastor at Willow Creek Wheaton. And we have been a church since 2002. And since 2004, we've been at Wheaton Academy and just have really established an outreach there and a community there for many years, and have been so excited for this long search to find a permanent home, and love this piece of land, and just really can't wait to get started there and to have a permanent home finally. And so thanks for your time, and I'm happy to take any questions that you might have.
Thanks, Scott. I'll give an overview of our application. It must be noted, members of the committee, that places of assembly are allowed as a permitted use in the R2 district and can be built as a matter of right under the county zoning ordinance if certain criteria are met. One, located adjacent to at least an arterial roadway. Yes, it is Winfield Road. Two, the use takes primary access to and from the arterial road. Yes, it does, Winfield Road. Third, the use is not operated in an existing single-family home or dwelling. It is not, it's vacant land. Fourth, the use is operated using public sewer and water. In this case, it's not, but the applicant has private systems approved by the health department and permits from the health department, which were exhibits of the ZBA. Willow Creek Wheaton would be allowed to construct its church as a matter of right if the public sewer and water were available to serve the site. Consequently, the sole issue to consider is whether a variance would be granted to use a membrane bioreactor system and well, rather than public sewer and water, which the ZBA found should be granted. In 2014, the Illinois Department of Public Health approved the membrane bioreactor system as a sanitary sewer hookup alternative. DuPage County Health Department has issued permits for both the membrane bioreactor and the well system, A fire protection system will be provided to use a well rather than public water, which will meet all the requirements of the applicable fire code. No variances from the fire code are being sought. There were comments from the Winfield Fire Protection District. They're outlined in the ZBA packet. We testified at the hearing we would meet all of those comments and criteria and anything else under the fire code. Most, if not all, issues raised as part of public comment cannot be considered as part of this application. Traffic can't be considered. The zoning ordinance allows places of assembly on an arterial roadway. Comments regarding stormwater, wetland, loss of life can't be considered like any as of right development. Those are part of the permit process. Complaints that Willow Creek Wheat is not a tax-paying entity cannot be considered because as a matter of state and federal law. Also, comments that a fire code variance is being sought are now not correct. All fire code requirements will be met, as well as all comments that were submitted by the Winfield Fire Protection District will be met. All standards for a variance from the public sewer and water requirement have been met as a ZBA found. Public utilities are not available to service the site, which is the practical difficulty. The closest sanitary connection, this is in the Wheaton Sanitary District. That closest connection is 1.8 miles away, county water 7 miles. Those are the ones we have as a matter of right. We cannot use Winfield's utilities because we're not in Winfield. We would have to be annexed into Winfield. And I can go into that a little bit as part of my response to Mayor Spandy. But even if connection were allowed, it's not possible because Mr. Kudwell were so, the rights of way do not exist to extend it from Winfield, even if the village allowed us to. Lastly, the use of a membrane bioreactor and well will not be injurious to the neighborhood or detrimental to the public welfare. Applicant's testimony in the health department permit make it clear the membrane bioreactor system eliminates the concerns of the past of a septic system failing. The well will be sized to provide water for both domestic and fire protection sources. The well has been permitted by the health department and will meet all of the Winfield fire protection requirements. In sum, the health department permits and commitment by Willow Wheaton to meet all the comments noted in the fire protection district letters prove that all the standards for a variance have been met. This was affirmed when the ZBA recommended approval of this application. Consequently, recommending approval of this application is appropriate under the facts of this case. Can I now briefly respond to the?
Yes, you may, but briefly, because you certainly have had your allotted 3 minutes, but we'll give you a couple of minutes to respond to the statements that were made earlier.
Everything provided at the ZBA was true and accurate, contrary to what was stated. Again, Winfield sewer and water is not available. We're not in their town. We're not in their district. As far as sanitary sewer, we did meet with them years ago to explore that. As Mr. Kudwell will show, the right-of-way does not exist to extend them, even if we could. They also wanted us to pay a payment in lieu of taxes, which we got into at the ZBA. We made a good faith offer based on previous ones made by Wheaton Christian Grammar School and what possibly 80 townhomes here would be. We made a good faith offer over 20 years, adjusted what those Wheaton Christian had paid for inflation, and the village of Winfield wanted more than twice that with no time limit. Again, if we were in their town, just like here, you could not even have a non-taxing body have to pay a payment in lieu of taxes as part of a zoning application. But because it's annexation, they were able to ask that. It was just not feasible. So again, and Mr. Kudwell will show, even if they were, there's a practical difficulty of not being available. So no, we just can't go and hook up to Winfield sewer and water. Winfield Fire Protection District having no comment, they did. They had 2 letters We responded at the hearing that we would meet all of their requirements. We would meet all those comments that were outlined in the letter. Let's see. And also, there was public comment available 15 days after the close of the ZBA hearing. There never was any response by the Village of Winfield. We could then again address those comments point by point in very thorough detail.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Who's next, Eileen?
Steve Koloff,
Good one.
Kuba.
There you go.
Good morning, members of the committee. Thank you for your time this morning. I'll try not to be repetitive on what Mr. Casson talked about. Obviously, the site plan itself is in conformance with all the requirements of the zoning district outside of this one variance that we are requesting. We've been to the various departments, including the DOT. We've gotten their approval on the access point, so that's a non-issue. I just want to speak a little bit on the practical difficulty issue. So this is a part of this property, or these properties are a part of the Winfield Sanitary District. The nearest connection to the Winfield Sanitary District is give or take 1.8 miles away. We've shown that on Exhibit E, which I believe you all have. With respect to public water in the county, there's none close. I believe it's roughly 7 miles away over in Glen Ellen. So both of those obviously practical hardships to connecting to public water and sewer within the county. As has been mentioned earlier, clearly there is public water and sewer being extended as part of the Bunkies development. Again, that is in the Village of Winfield. The issue that we have there is twofold. One, the right-of-way for Winfield Road is prescriptive by nature, meaning essentially that we cannot extend these utilities into that right-of-way without permission of the landowners. And there are 3 landowners between the church's property and the Bunkies. So we would need their permission to do that. In addition, it would also require an easement beyond that right-of-way because we don't believe that there is sufficient room in the existing right-of-way in order to accommodate the 2 utilities to extend down to the church. So for both of those reasons, we are just not able to extend those utilities. And like Mr. Casson alluded to earlier, we don't even have the right or the ability to do so because the Village of Winfield, at this point, we just don't have a way to get in agreement with them. Mr. Casson did mention the fact that we have a well and a biobarrier system. The biobarrier system, real quickly, is an internal process. So unlike systems of the past, typical septic field, the septic field did all the treatment in the field itself. In this case, all the treatment is handled internally inside a concrete vault. The only thing that leaves that vault is potable water, and it goes out into a filtration field. That same water that's leaving there can be used for car washes, landscaping, things of that nature. It is akin to the same water that's discharged after completion of treatment at a water treatment plant. So these are different systems than what we knew back in 2012 when this ordinance was granted. So with this system being internal, there really isn't the same failure that we saw with a typical conventional treatment system, septic field. Again, like Mr. Casson noted, we've gone.
Let me ask you to wrap up if you would, please, sir.
I will. Thank you, sir. We've gone to the Department of Health. We've got their approvals. Again, the fire system, I've spoken with Winfield Fire District. They have no issue with what we're doing. We've asked if they wanted additional measures, and they have said they do not, to simply abide by the code, which we will.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, Eileen?
That's it for people here. We've got some comments that Assistant State's Attorney Anthony Heyman will read.
Okay, please, Tony, go ahead.
We have 5 comments. 2 are from Bill Lucahans. He doesn't actually have a comment, but he's just indicating he submitted something for the Maywood Sportsman's Club petition and the GI and M LLC petition. Just blank request to speak or for public comment. I also have a very lengthy one from Eric Spandy of the Village of Winfield. He was the first speaker by Zoom, so that would be duplicative. I will leave his written comments with Eileen for just inclusion in the committee's records. That leaves one, Lisa Boatwright on East Street in Winfield. She's speaking regarding the Willow Creek petition. Please do not support the construction of the Willow Creek megachurch in Winfield. If approved, this will create an aggravating traffic situation every single weekend, and diverted traffic will go illegally, I believe, down my street, East Street. Every time there's a backup on Roosevelt Road, my street is flooded with diverted traffic. I recognize that there exists an independent IDOT plan to expand Roosevelt between County Farm and Winfield Road. I don't necessarily support that either. But even if that occurs, it's not going to resolve the north-south traffic on Winfield Road. Keep in mind the importance of keeping Winfield Road clear and safe and easy access for CDH Hospital. Not to mention the destruction of the beautiful land across from Cantini. I would support Willow Creek's expansion if they didn't build new. I encourage them to instead pursue space such as the giant abandoned mall in St. Charles, for instance. Winfield land would be a beautiful space, yes, but it is not theirs for the taking. Please respect that land. Finally, Winfield needs tax revenue. A church like Winfield Creek, while I am sure it would benefit some community members, can do their good work in another space. Their use of Winfield land robs this community of the opportunity to support itself. Why should Winfield give them essentially free parking? If this committee were to ignore the environmental damage of developing this land and another project utilize the land instead, at least Winfield residents would benefit through property taxes. Please consider how the local residents feel about this unnecessary project and vote no to Willow Creek. I also have one from Charles Prochaska. He lives on Fullerton and Elmhurst, and he's commenting about the Maywood Sportsman's Club petition. Dear Development Committee, I am a resident of Elmhurst and neighbor of Maywood Sportsman's Club. I comment today to conditionally oppose the zoning variations requested by the club. The club's trap shooting activities where shotgun blasts can be heard loudly in our neighborhood on Mondays and Wednesdays until 10 p.m. and on Sunday mornings and afternoons are a grave nuisance and interfere with our neighborhood's quiet enjoyment of our land. Accompanying the noise nuisance is the lighting nuisance from the towers that illuminate the trap shooting fields during operating hours. The cumulative effect of the construction of the proposed billboards on top of the existing sound and light nuisance would be injurious to our neighborhood, detrimental to the public welfare, and contrary to the spirit of DuPage County's R4 single-family residence zoning use. The club has proposed a site plan that the zoning hearing officer's recommendation was contingent upon. This included a proposed sound wall, which may remediate some of the noise nuisance and make the club's activities, including the billboard construction, more tolerable. However, the site plan was vague on details for the wall. Their attorney has indicated in correspondence that in addition to the wall lengths depicted on the plan, it will be 12 feet tall and constructed of wood. This committee should insist that the club present specific evidence of the effectiveness of any proposed sound wall to mitigate the noise of its trap shooting activities and require construction of such a wall as a predicate to issuing the permits for the billboards. If the committee is not satisfied that such a wall will mitigate shooting noise, it should consider efforts to restrict or eliminate trap shooting altogether. I've spoken with numerous residents of Parker Avenue in Elmhurst, the block directly bordering the club. Several are elderly and not capable of participating in these proceedings. They are equally frustrated with the club shooting activities and its billboard construction proposal. On behalf of those residents, as well as my family, I ask this committee to take our concerns into consideration and ensure that they are satisfactorily addressed in the committee's ultimate decision. That is all.
Thank you. Okay, that concludes the public comment portion of the meeting. We'll move on to approval of the minutes. I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes of Tuesday, October 20th, 2020.
So move Chaplin. Second.
Rutledge. Whoop.
The motion by member Chaplin, I wasn't sure who the second was,
Second, Sadia Covert.
and seconded by member Colbert. Any additions, corrections, or deletions? Hearing none, seeing none, roll call, please.
Member Chaplin,
Aye.
member Covert,
Aye.
member Hart,
Aye.
member Ozark,
Aye.
member Rutledge,
Aye.
Chair Tornatori.
Aye. And the minutes are approved. Moving on to regulatory, item 6A, I'll entertain a motion to approve action item 6A for credit accounts approval. I believe, Paul, if this is the same thing we took up in Public Works, the allowance of credit cards by some of our employees for purchases, is that correct?
No,
No? Okay, I apologize. What is it then?
it's very similar. It's not the allowance of credit cards. It's the allowance of the accounts that we use to purchase the day-to-day operations. With the change that was made in procurement to allow staff to approve up to $15,000, we were asked to bring a list of the current contracts that we have or current expenses that we use to pay for the normal things like printing, publications of Office Depot, things like that. So that's what this
Okay.
does.
I apologize. I think I misstated what I thought, but that's what I thought it was. Okay. I thought I saw someone's hand up.
Real quick, it's important to note that our building and zoning department does not have any credit cards.
Correct.
And I just want to clarify that no departments have a credit card.
That's correct.
The treasurer has a credit card, Gwen Henry does, which I think is the only one here at the county. But all these accounts are basically just an open credit account at a store, at a Home Depot, at a business supply store to allow us to purchase something, and then they bill us. All the checks and balances are still in place, the sign-offs, the auditor, the finance department. This is simply another check and balance to let the parent committees know these are open accounts out there that departments have. We took it through in Public Works, Transportation, so it's pretty common that they are not credit cards.
Okay, no, I appreciate that. Member Ozak.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This question is for Mr. Kottmeyer. Going forward in our next board session, do you think we need to consider perhaps having a credit card for department heads, Public Works, facilities, et cetera, where they do fairly frequent purchases by employees? That was what was discussed at Public Works.
Yeah,
That's
so
what we should talk about in terms of the county would get the miles. I somewhat jokingly referred to the employee getting the miles, but miles are a real commodity. So would this be something we should consider? I'm thinking, where you look at maybe 5 to 7 credit cards exist and, then they're able to use them per department.
Not a bad item to take up. I would probably say not the next county board because you guys have a fairly big agenda with your budget.
No, not the next meeting. I was talking about the next session of the county board.
I would recommend a little modification to that, to keep better tighter controls on it. Would
Oh,
be
yeah.
maybe have finance issued 2 or 3 credit cards so that they're the keeper of the credit cards.
Yeah.
And the department needs something where an IT purchase, maybe finance can take it and do that. And then with a very select account, the
Right.
county auditor can have a much better control on that. So if you're going to do it, if that's the will of the board, make it very small, maybe have it in finance committee. And then if people need it, if development needs advice, they go up to finance and hey, I need a credit card to buy this. There's a little more check and balance. So if that's the will of the board, we can do that.
Okay, and I need to ask one other question to your knowledge. Was there an issue with this in the past that this became the procedure that there are not credit cards out in the general?
I can tell you that there has never really been a widespread credit card usage in the county. It's always been a direction of we don't want them here because
Right.
you hear all of the issues out there and we just never wanted to be in that position. So we didn't want to have 15 credit cards floating around. So as far as I've been here, there hasn't been many credit cards.
So if we did take this up, we'd be looking at a really limited number of cards, really tight controls. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Patmeyer. Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we have a motion and a second on that item, I believe. Roll call, please.
Member Chapman,
Aye.
Member Covert,
Aye.
Member Hart,
Aye.
Member Ozog,
Aye.
Member Rutledge,
Aye.
Chair Tornatori.
Aye. And the motion carries. Moving on to item 6B, I will entertain a motion to approve DCO 95-20 ordinance Z2027, Wheaton Winfield Road LLC, approving the zoning board of appeals recommendation to approve a variation requiring places of assembly to be operated using public sewer and water, and allowing the applicant to service the place of assembly with a well and membrane bioreactor septic system rather than public water and sewer. This was approved at the ZBA by a vote of 5-2.
So moved, Ozog.
I have a motion by member Ozog,
Second, Chaplin.
second by member Chaplin. Before we get into any discussion, Paul, is there anything you wanted to add to bring us up to speed?
No, I think the petitioner and his the consultants have presented the information that was addressed at the zoning board of appeals.
Okay, any questions, comments, discussion? Member Ozak.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I have a question that has just come up with the attorney's presentation. So I'm not clear if the DuPage County Department of Health has specifically approved the losing my terminology.
Bioreactor.
Excuse me, bioreactor. Have they specifically approved this project, or have they approved bioreactors in the past?
You know, they've approved this specific project. The petitioner submitted a permit application to the health department for this specific project. Both the septic system and the well system that have been reviewed by the health department, and that permit has been issued by the health department. So it's specific to this project.
And is that the typical chain of command, that they would be issuing that permit before they would go before the ZBA?
Typically what happens is someone would go for zoning entitlement first. Once they receive zoning entitlement, they go for their building permit review, which would include building review, zoning again, health, and stormwater. In this particular case, because the issue here was septic and well versus sewer and water, the petitioner chose, which is his right, to actually go to the health department and do all the engineering up front to actually get those permits from the health department, to make sure that when they came before this board, they could say that they actually had those permits issued by the health department.
Okay, and Paul, I have one other question. Can you think of any situation where we have given this kind of zoning variance for a public place of assembly, where they're looking to not hook into city sewer and water, and instead would prefer to do their own in an unincorporated area? Can you think of any instances where we've given this variance before?
Well, two issues here. The answer to the question is no, this is the first time.
Okay.
And to be clear, what the petitioner presented at the public hearing was that not that they did not want to connect to public sewer and water, it's that they submitted evidence and testimony that they could not physically connect to public sewer and water. But
Okay.
this could be the first variation of its sort.
And one other
Okay,
question.
Member Ozak, there's other people who wanted to ask questions, so I'll give you one more at this point, then
Okay.
we can circle back around.
Last one. In your experience, would you say that generally houses of assembly have become incorporated into the nearest municipality? Has that been the general trend or pattern?
No, quite the opposite. Most, what we've seen in the course of the last 20, 25 years is most of the religious institutions, which we now refer to as places of assembly, have developed in the unincorporated area.
Okay, but they've been able to tap into sewer and water. Thank you.
Combination of both.
Okay.
Developed on septic and well and sewer.
Okay, thank you.
Member Chaplin, you're next, and then Member Rutledge.
Thank you, Chairman. So I have a question about
the hooking up to Winfield's water supply, because we've heard a couple of different scenarios here. So they would have to annex. What would be the process to get the water from Winfield? They would have to sign an annexation agreement, and then they would have to, we heard about 3 landowners in between the church and the Bucky's property. So would they, have these landowners been approached about allowing them access to hook into the water? Were any of those conversations had or anything? Do we know?
A couple of things in terms of the first question, the first part of your question. When a property is not contiguous to a municipality, which means it doesn't touch a property that's located in a municipality, and a property owner wants some service from that municipality, typically the municipality will, and the developer will enter into what's called a pre-annexation agreement. And that pre-annexation agreement will be reviewed and approved by the local municipality, and there'll be an agreement typically that the municipality will provide the services to the developer, and then at some point the developer will agree to annex into the city, usually when contiguity is achieved. So that's, in this particular case, there are 3 properties between property that's incorporated in the village of Winfield, which has been referred to as the Bucky's gas station property, and the subject property. So there is no contiguity, and there's no opportunity for contiguity. We also heard that in addition to that contiguity issue, the 3 properties that are still in the unincorporated area adjacent to this property, and between this property and the property incorporated, their properties are deeded to the center line of Winfield Road, which means where there is, we've heard about public right-of-way. Usually public right-of-way is right-of-way that inures to the local road jurisdiction. In this particular case, the county, which has jurisdiction over Winfield Road, has the ability to work on Winfield Road via a prescriptive easement, meaning that the county can do work in that roadway, fix the road, take care of the road, but technically that property is on the property of the residential neighbors. Typically, when property annexes into a community, they will dedicate road right of way so that we don't have this situation. Unfortunately, we have this situation here. In terms of the third part of your question, I think if it's okay, Mr. Chairman, I'll refer to the attorney about contact with the 3 property owners. That's okay?
Briefly, yes, please.
Yeah, real quick. We actually had one of the property owners, one that is due north to the church's development, approach the church and has stated in no uncertain terms that he would not grant the easement necessary to extend water and sewer from Winfield. He is absolutely against it. And so that is an additional hardship, I think, to this process. So we do have confirmation that he would not grant that easement.
And as I noted, for annexation, the village wanted payment in lieu of taxes, which is a very unusual request. We're not for profit, and it just didn't make sense to even go down that path with any of the others because they were never going to allow us to annex because we couldn't.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and one other real quick, it's a simple question. So did I thought I read so
Liz, you're breaking up. Liz, I think you're
church
frozen.
is going to hold about 1,200 people. Oh, I'm sorry.
You're breaking
did
up
I
on me
freeze?
anyhow.
Okay, I'm sorry. Can you hear me?
Go ahead.
Okay. Okay, that's okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Or no? Can't hear me still?
I can hear you.
That's
Go
okay.
ahead.
Oh, okay. So the church holds about 1,200 people. Okay, so did I read correct that the facility, the church is going to hold about 1,200 people, can hold about 1,200 people, is that correct?
Approximately, yeah.
So, okay, so, and because that's my concern with that amount of people, 1,200 people in the church with this bioreactor septic system and well water, and I know they're going to have storage tanks for fire prevention, but I don't know that, you know, That's my big concern with this whole project, is that those storage containers and fighting a fire with 1,200 people possibly in a building at one time. So can be addressed at all how that would work, the system work.
Paul, do you have any response to that? Other than what I heard, which I thought was that the fire district approved this.
So
plan.
what, yeah, what's happened there, Mr. Chairman, is that as part of any zoning application, the county staff sends notification out to all of the jurisdictions that would ultimately have to sign off on any permits for the development. In this case, as we've heard already, the property owner has already gone to the county health department and actually received permits for the septic and well system. And to be clear, the permits that they received from the health department for the septic and well system have all been sized relative to the site plan and the number of occupants that they're proposing. So the site plan and the operation of the facility are all consistent with the septic and well permits that the county health department's issued. Relative to the fire protection district, there have been 2 letters that we have in your packet that have come from the county, or I'm sorry, from the fire protection district. The reason that there are 2 is that in the interim of this process, the fire chief has changed in the Winfield fire protection. The original fire chief had indicated that they didn't have any concerns, but there were certain regulations that had to be met. The petitioner has agreed to meet those regulations. With a new fire chief in place, the petitioner met with that new fire chief, and we have essentially the same type of letter from the fire protection district. No concerns, meet the code, and the petitioner has agreed that they will be meeting the fire protection code as well as all the building codes once they get to that stage in the process.
Okay. Any other questions? Member Rutledge.
Thank you, Chairman. Paul, I'm not familiar with this type of a septic system. Does it require a perk test? And where does that fall in the process, if it does?
I will give you a quick answer. This is not the typical conventional septic system with septic tank and septic field. And for that reason, it does not require percolation test. It is more of a mechanical system. But it does not require percolation test because there is no field. The only disbursement of any effluent onto the ground is the water that comes out of the system after it goes through the mechanical system. But that does not require any percolation test.
And what kind of volume of water is this thing going to be kicking out?
I don't know the answer to that. If I could point to the engineer for that answer, Mr. Chairman, that's okay.
Yeah. So, and quite honestly, it's in the packet of information that you guys have. I don't remember the exact disbursement, but I will tell you that there is a factor of safety on that, and I believe that factor of safety is 3 or 3.5 times the number of people that are in there. So the tank is not just sized for a capacity of 1,200 people. It is actually sized for more than that to provide a factor of safety in that system.
Okay, maybe beyond my scope of knowledge on this, but that doesn't really answer the question about how much water is going to be discharged from this. Eventually that system is going to fill up and it's going to have to discharge that water.
Yeah, Commissioner, I'm sorry. There are 6,000 gallons that are being treated per week. That's the maximum treatment load on this. All of that treatment takes place inside the tanks, and it will slowly disperse over time, over the course of days at that point. So once that tank is filling up, the clean water will disperse into that field for infiltration only. Again, no treatment in the field, is just a slow flow of water out of it.
And is the retention that's shown on the plat enough to take on that kind of a discharge? Is that part of the plan for how much area was put on there for retention?
Are you referring to the detention volume on the plan or the septic?
Yes.
Yeah, the detention volume that is shown on that plan is for the entirety of that development. I will add, as it relates to the fire suppression on this, we did create a retention volume in that pond as another water source, and the Winfield Fire Protection District said they don't want it and don't need it for fire protection on this building.
Thank you.
I'm trying to, oh, I'm sorry. If I could just go back to the ZBA, I think our consultant there had testified that the discharge, and I want to get to the exact page. I believe he said it was like a garden hose, like 6 gallons a minute whenever it did discharge. So it was just very, very nominal. And I'll try to find the exact place.
Great, thank you, Mr. Gasser.
I'm sorry. That's correct. He's right outside. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
He verified that's.
Okay, so it's been verified. Okay, Member Ozag, take yourself off mute though.
This question is for Paul Haas. Mr. Haas, can you tell me when this city sewer and water for places of assembly became a county code?
2011.
2011, so fairly recently. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome. Any other questions from members of the committee? Okay, Paul, if I can, I just want to verify 2 things. Well, these are all great questions, some of which I had and don't need to answer. But the system that's in place, the bioreactor septic system, is a system that has been approved specifically for this property by the health department. Is that a correct statement?
Yes.
And that the fire suppression system that would be in place under this system has also been signed off, for lack of a better word, by the appropriate fire protection agency.
Conceptually, they don't have a permit from them yet, like they have with the health department, but conceptually with the fire protection district.
Which is all they could get at this time?
Correct.
Okay.
There are certain conditions that the fire protection district requires, and assuming if this does get approved by county board, they would be required to submit plans to the fire protection district with all of the requisite conditions met from the fire protection district.
And if those conditions would not be met and they would not get their permit, they couldn't open for business, correct?
They would not get a permit, they wouldn't be allowed to build.
Okay, okay. Okay, any other questions by any other members of the committee before we call for a vote? Okay, there's been a motion and a second to approve the petition. Roll call, please.
Member Chaplin,
No.
Member Covert,
Aye.
Member Hart,
Aye.
Member Ozog,
No.
Member Rutledge,
No.
Chair Tornatori.
Aye, and appears to be 3-3. Now, what does that do for us, Councilor Heyman?
Recommendation goes to the goes to the full board.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you. What was that?
No recommend.
No recommendation. No recommendation, and goes to the full board. Okay. All right, thank you. Thank you all for coming. Moving on to the next item, item C, I'll entertain a motion to approve DCO 96-20 ordinance Z 2050. This is a zoning hearing officer's recommendation to approve a variation to allow a 6-foot tall closed fence. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Motion by member Rutledge,
Second, Covert.
second by member Covert. Any questions, discussions on this item? Hearing none, seeing none, roll call, please.
Member Chaplin. Member Chaplin,
Might be frozen.
So moved, Chaplin.
Member Covert,
Aye.
Member Hart,
Aye.
So moved, Chaplin. Second, Chaplin.
Member Ozog,
Okay.
Yes, aye.
Member Rutledge,
Aye.
Chair Tornatori.
Aye. And the motion carries with 2 seconds and a motion
Aye.
by member Chaplin. Another aye.
I'm
Liz,
sorry.
you're frozen. You're behind us, but that's okay. We're glad you're
Aye.
with us. Moving on to item D, the motion carries. Item D, I'll entertain a motion.
Thumbs up.
Okay,
Aye, thumbs up.
I think you need to listen.
okay. I'll entertain a motion to approve DCO 97-20, ordinance C 2053. Savitra, this is a zoning hearing officer's recommendation to approve a variation to reduce the side yard setback from 10 feet to 5 feet for a shed.
So moved. Rutledge.
Motion by member Rutledge, second by
Chaplin.
member Chaplin. Okay, there's a motion and a second. Any discussion, questions, comments? Hearing none, seeing none. Roll call, please.
Member Chaplin,
Aye.
There we go.
member Covert,
Aye.
member Hart,
Aye.
member Ozog,
Aye.
member Rutledge. Aye. Chair Tornatori,
Aye, and the motion carries. Moving on to item E, I'll entertain a motion to approve DCO 98-20, ordinance C 2063, Reyes, a zoning hearing officer's recommendation to approve a variation to reduce a corner yard property setback from 20 feet to 9 feet.
So move Chaplin.
Second, Ozog.
Motion by member Chaplin, seconded by member Ozag. Any discussion, questions, comments? Hearing none, seeing none. Roll call, please.
member Chaplin,
Aye.
member Covert,
Aye.
member Hart,
Aye.
member Ozog,
Aye.
member Rutledge.
Aye.
Chair Tornatori,
Aye, and the motion carries. Moving on to item F, I'll entertain a motion to approve DCO 99-20, ordinance Z 2066, Korea. The zoning hearing officer's
So moved.
recommendation to approve a variation to increase the height of a fence from 6 feet, 6 to 8 feet. The
Second,
motion by
Ozog.
member Chaplin, seconded by
Ozog.
member Ozag. Any discussion, questions, comments? Hearing none, seeing none. Roll call, please.
member Chaplin,
Aye.
member Covert,
Aye.
member Hart,
Aye.
member Ozog,
Aye.
member Rutledge.
Aye.
Chair Tornatori,
Aye, and the motion carries. Moving on to item G, I'll entertain a motion to approve DCO 100-20, ordinance C 2067, Petrucia, a zoning hearing officer's recommendation to approve a variation to allow cumulative area of detached accessory buildings.
So move Chaplin.
Second, Rutledge.
So motion by member Chaplin, seconded by member Rutledge. Any discussion, questions? Member Ozak.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Haas, has there been any comment from the neighbors about this particular project or proposal?
No objections, and no comments from any,
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions, comments? Hearing none, seeing none. Roll call, please.
member Chaplin,
Aye.
member Covert,
Aye.
member Hart,
Aye.
member Ozog,
Aye.
member Rutledge.
Aye.
Chair Tornatori,
Aye, and the motion carries. Moving on to item H, I'll entertain a motion to approve DCO 101-20, ordinance C 2068, a zoning hearing officer's recommendation to approve a conditional use to allow an existing shed to remain less than 10 feet from the interior property's line.
So move Chaplin.
Second, Covert.
Motion by member Chaplin, seconded by member Covert. Any discussion, questions, comments? Hearing none, seeing none. Roll call, please.
member Chaplin,
Aye.
member Covert,
Aye.
member Hart,
Aye.
member Ozog,
Aye.
member Rutledge.
Aye.
Chair Tornatori,
Aye, and the motion carries. Moving on to item I, I'll entertain a motion to approve DCO 102-20, ordinance C 2069, Anderson, a zoning hearing officer's recommendation to approve a variation to reduce the corner yard setback for a new detached garage.
So move Chaplin.
Motion by member Chaplin, second by
Ozog.
member Ozag. Any discussion, questions, comments? Roll call, please.
member Chaplin,
Aye.
member Covert,
Aye.
member Hart,
Aye.
member Ozog,
Aye.
member Rutledge.
Aye.
Chair Tornatori,
Aye, and the motion carries. Moving on to item J, for purposes of information, you'll note that this is a denial from the zoning hearing officer, but I'll entertain a motion in the affirmative. So I'll entertain a motion to approve DCO 103-20, ordinance C 2021, Katie's Place. This is zoning hearing officer's recommendation to deny a variation for a reduction in parking requirements for the issuance of a consumption liquor license. Do I have a motion to
moved,
approve?
Chaplin.
Motion
Second, Hart.
approved by member Chaplin, seconded by member Hart. Any discussion, questions, comments? Member Rutledge.
Yes, I'm curious to know why they want to reduce the parking, and really from the overhead view of that, I can't determine which parking spaces they want to get rid of. So if Paul, if you could give us a little more information about that.
If you look in your packet on page 134 and 135, there's some overhead pictures. This is a strip shopping center down on Route 83 south of 91st Street. The issue here is that in the strip shopping center, there are 3 restaurant facilities already. The zoning ordinance requires that where you have a strip shopping center, there are a certain number of parking spaces that you are required to have. Those parking space, the technical number of parking spaces increases when you have restaurant facilities. Because there are already 3 restaurant facilities in this project, in this development, they have effectively used up all the allowable or required parking spaces that are available. This petition is to create a 4th restaurant in the strip shopping center. And when you create the 4th restaurant, that triggers 20 parking spaces per 1,000 square feet. And when you do the math on that, they fall short of parking spaces required for this 4th restaurant by about 15 parking spaces. Effectively what they're asking for in terms of the restaurant, they'd like to have a restaurant so they can get a liquor license, so they can get a gaming license. That's the requirement from the state of Illinois. However, once again, when you do the math for the entire shopping center, this 4th restaurant kicks the overall parking needs beyond what is technically or practically and technically available.
Is this,
Member Rutledge, go ahead.
one quick follow-up.
Go ahead.
Is this like a fence or anything like that that they would ask the opinion of the surrounding businesses about?
In theory, they could. In this particular case, the petitioner did submit, and you can find it in your packet, an analysis of the activity and the general operation of the strip shopping center, including the existing restaurants. And that analysis showed that when the proposed restaurant would be operating, 50% of the land uses or the uses that are in the strip shopping center would be closed. They're more the more service oriented operations would close at 6 o'clock at night, where this restaurant would effectively be starting around 5 o'clock and going to 2 in the morning pursuant to the liquor license. So as part of his analysis, the idea was that while they may technically not meet the requirements, they would practically have enough parking spaces in this entire strip shopping center to accommodate the existing restaurant facilities and the new restaurant facility. The issue that the zoning hearing officer had was that the petitioner really didn't, in his mind, didn't show that this was a hardship or practical difficulty. This was really more a matter of financial burden on the petitioner. Having said that, there is documentation in the application that was submitted in testimony that shows the relationship of existing operations in the strip shopping center versus daytime activities, versus what would occur at nighttime.
Thanks, Paul.
Before I get into Member Covert, if you would indulge me, Zadia, just as a follow-up, Paul, if it's a financial problem, was there a suggestion that they could find parking somewhere else and pay somebody? I don't understand it. If there's only so many places to park, there's only so many places to park, correct?
Right. Right. I was actually going to say that I'm chairing strategic planning committee right now, so I have to leave.
Okay.
Oh.
But could I get back to you on that question though?
Yes.
But yes, I agree. But I would have to excuse myself. We have special guests coming in, and strategic planning starts now that I chair.
Okay.
So, all right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thanks. You're welcome. Okay,
So-
Paul, can you answer that question for me?
Yes. One of the issues that was brought up is that, once again, if you look on page 135 of your overall packet, it shows an area view of the property, and it shows some box cutouts. Those are outlots of this strip shopping center. Those outlots are not included in the parking count that a property owner would have to demonstrate that it doesn't have enough parking spaces. The zoning hearing officer asked if there was opportunity in some of these outlots to be able to lease parking spaces. The issue that was raised at public hearing by the petitioner was that would cost them money, and that's where the financial burden came in. Having said that, the zoning hearing officer left open the opportunity for the petitioner to pursue that question, and he never did. We had 2 public hearings. Petitioner never reached out to those outlot owners to determine whether or not he could lease some parking spaces from them. So that's primarily why the zoning hearing officer felt that this was a financial issue, that the petitioner just didn't reach out because there was concern about having to pay for extra parking spaces off-site or in outlots that were adjacent to the strip center, but not technically part of the strip shopping center.
Okay, any other questions? So let me give you this hypothetical. So you've got a strip shopping center with a specific number of parking places and 3 or 4 businesses that, under what might be the then current type of businesses that are there, have appropriate parking places. One of those businesses now wants to expand their business, their hours of operation. They're a tenant, presumably, in that shopping center, paying rent the same as every other business, who may use more parking places than that business used, but now they want to increase their business for whatever reason. They're not allowed to get the necessary variances or conditional uses or approval simply because they're the 3rd or 4th business in the queue here, so to speak.
Well,
I don't think that's fair. Unless I'm missing something.
Well, there's 2 different things going on here. There's a matter of what technically is required versus what practically people need for their land uses. One of the things that the petitioner did demonstrate was that the practical usage of this strip shopping center in terms of parking spaces was that it was not overparked practically. There were plenty of parking spaces at different times of the day when different types of uses were in this facility, both day and nighttime. The issue is purely a technical issue. That is that when you add up all of the required parking spaces for all of the uses that are in the strip shopping center, the totality of the technical required number of parking spaces falls short. Once again, the petitioner was able to demonstrate that, practically speaking, this strip shopping center is not overparked, meaning there are plenty of parking spaces if people need them. Now, in direct answer to your question about the technical issue, if someone wanted to expand their use, they would, in theory, expand to another tenant space. By expanding to that tenant space, in theory, while they would be expanding their use, they would also, in theory, pick up the parking spaces, the technical parking spaces that were already allotted to that other tenant space. So in theory, the numbers would technically work out, because even though they're making their use bigger, there are already parking spaces that have been assigned to that other tenant space in the shopping center somewhere. Does that make sense? To answer your question?
Yeah, it does. But then on the other hand, it doesn't. And maybe before I get to my next question, I don't mean to belabor it, but 2 questions. The petitioner here doesn't own, do they own this strip center?
No, they would just be a tenant in the strip center.
Okay. So if I have a pizza place in a strip center and I do fairly well, and then all of a sudden I go gangbusters on pizza and a number of other people decide to come to my pizza place, which requires more parking, and I want to get a liquor license because of that as a result. Now I'm presumably, because of this, being punished because I'm successful. I haven't extended or increased my square footage. I've merely increased my business. So how then is it me as the pizza place have to suffer the consequences when the other three businesses, a video store, a restaurant, and a hair salon, may have more parking spaces than they, more people coming than they have parking spaces allotted to them? I don't understand the equity here on how we separate and divide the number of spaces per unit, if you will. I know there's a certain number of parking places that go per square foot in these things, but it just seems inequitable to punish somebody because they happen to be the fourth store of four that happens to want to increase their business. Am I making any sense? Maybe I'm misstating it. It just doesn't seem fair to me.
You are, and so if the pizza parlor is operating, the pizza parlor is already required to have X number of parking spaces technically under our ordinance, and that would be, let's say they're 1,000 square feet of space. They're technically required to have 20 parking spaces. Whether they use all of those or not is really technically not material to the zoning code requirement. The assumption that the zoning code makes in a strip shopping center is that if you have a certain amount of tenant spaces, you take the square footage for all of those tenant spaces, divided by 1,000, and then assign a certain number of parking spaces to the entire shopping center. And then what happens is all the users essentially share in all of the parking. Where it gets complicated is with when we have a restaurant, because in the zoning code, not only, it's just not simply the zoning code, there's some science behind it. A restaurant obviously has more parking needs than a dry cleaner, or for instance, even a takeout facility where no one's coming in and sitting down and staying for an hour or two. So the dilemma that we have here is that the more restaurants that you have as tenant spaces, the technical number of parking spaces increases, and there becomes a point of diminishing returns where you simply don't have enough physical parking spaces technically in the shopping center to accommodate multiple restaurant facilities. And that's the problem that we have here. We happen to have, this shopping center was originally designed for 3 restaurant facilities in terms of their operations and in terms of their parking. We now have a 4th restaurant that wants to come in and use one of the tenant spaces. And unfortunately, their technical number requires the 20 parking spaces. There physically just isn't the additional 20 parking spaces overall for this restaurant. The key, however, in terms of your practical concern, Mr. Chairman, that you're talking about, is what happens if the pizza place has a lot of people coming, and a lot more people coming. Well, what effectively will happen is they will share in the beauty salons parking spaces or the video stores parking spaces. I don't know that there's video stores anymore.
Except we're never going to give them a chance because we're not going to let them do it, because we're not going to give them the conditional use. And I guess my follow-up, and be my last question, I'll give it to anybody else who wants to add. Have any of the other businesses in the shopping center objected to this?
No, there's been no objection whatsoever. There's been, we've sent notification to the shopping center owner. Now, the shopping center owner is in support of this because he gets another tenant, but we've sent the shopping center owner relative to how his other tenants feel about this. We've also sent it to all the tenant holders in the facility. We've also sent it to all of these outlots that are adjacent to this property who are individual landowners. There's been no objection to the proposed variation request. And in addition, there's been no objection from the municipalities as well that are adjacent to this property.
So as I understand it, there's no objection from any of the stakeholders. There is the likelihood that there will be enough parking because of the differential in times for these various businesses. And the reason that the zoning hearing officer denied this was because the petitioner didn't feel that it was in his or her best economic interest to go out and lease or buy some adjacent property to park cars when the other businesses in the shopping center didn't have to do that. Am I correct?
That's a correct statement. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Member Rutledge.
Quick question, Chairman. does this variance only apply to Katie's Place, or would it stay in place if Katie's Place went out of business and moved out?
It would run with the land. So once the variation is granted, it would apply to the entire shopping center, which would mean then that the required number of parking spaces for the shopping center would be reduced by, in terms of the technical requirement, by a total of 20 parking spaces, presuming that if Katie's went out of business and another restaurant went in there, that restaurant would be able to go in there and still meet the technical requirements of the parking needs of the entire shopping center.
Thanks, Paul. And last question, is there any street parking adjacent that could be utilized for this?
There is, from a practical standpoint, it is not used. Those streets are technically private streets that are part of a larger multifamily residential subdivision. And practically speaking, in the times we've been down there, these tenants, the patrons of these tenants don't use the private driveways or streets of the apartment complex.
Thank you.
Member Hart.
Yes, just real briefly, I share a lot of the sentiments that Chair Tornatore mentioned earlier at the onset of this discussion item. Paul, one question just to clarify something based on what's written in the blurb. Is the issuance of a variance a prerequisite for this enterprise to getting a liquor license? It's something that's required for them to do that?
Yeah, there's a chain of events that occurs. This property owner wants to establish a restaurant. The restaurant parking requirements are X. X doesn't exist in a shopping center. If they get the variation for the parking, then they can be a restaurant. When they are a restaurant, then they can apply to the county liquor control commissioner to attempt to get a liquor license. If they do get a liquor license, then they take that to the state to get their gaming license. So it is part of the a trail, if you will, that they have to go through to ultimately get what they really want here, and that is 6 gaming facilities at this location. 6 gaming devices, I should say, at this location.
Okay, thank you.
And once again, if they can't get the variation, they can't be a restaurant and everything
Right.
else.
Thank you.
And lastly, I guess to close, the practical significance of all of this is that if it ultimately is determined that there's not enough parking places for all of the businesses will realize that, will suffer the consequences, and will deal with it accordingly. I mean, this isn't a safety issue. It's not like we're going to have cars backed up into the street coming in like we would if it were a gas station or something like that. I mean, this is a business decision, as I see it.
That's correct. It's purely a technical issue. To be clear, the analysis that the developer has done in terms of operation and when cars are there, when patrons are there, shows that there are not any practical issues with parking in this development, and adding another restaurant with the practical parking needs of this restaurant will not exacerbate the issue down there, because there is no issue. There's plenty of, bottom line is plenty of parking space practically for everyone to park and use the facilities down.
Okay, thank you. Anything further? Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve. So an aye vote would be to approve or overturn the zoning hearing officer's denial. A no vote would obviously be a no vote. So roll call, please.
Member Chaplin.
Frozen.
Member Chaplin.
That was an aye.
Member Hart.
Aye.
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 Member Ozog.
Aye.
Member Rutledge.
Aye.
Chair Tornatore.
Aye. And the motion carries. And Liz, you can only vote once. Sorry. Okay, moving on to item K. I'll entertain a motion to approve DCO 104-20, ordinance Z2074. Fisher, the zoning hearing officer's recommendation to approve a conditional use to allow an existing shed to remain less than 3 feet from the rear property line.
So moved, Chaplin.
Motion by
Second.
member Rutledge, second by member Chaplin. Any discussion, question, comments? Hearing none, seeing none, roll call, please.
Member Chaplin.
Aye.
Member Hart.
Aye.
Member Ozog,
Aye.
Member Rutledge,
Aye.
Chair Tornatori,
Aye, and the motion carries. Moving on to item L, I will entertain a motion to approve DCO 105-20 ordinance Z 2075 Walden as zoning hearing officer's recommendation to approve a conditional use to allow a shed to remain closer than 10 feet from the interior property line.
So moved, Chaplin.
Second, Rutledge.
Motion by member Chaplin, seconded by member Rutledge. Any discussion, questions, comments? Hearing none, seeing none, roll call, please.
Member Chaplin,
Aye.
Member Hart,
Aye.
Member Ozog,
Aye.
Member Rutledge,
Aye.
Chair Tornatori,
Aye, and the motion carries. Moving on to item M, I'll entertain a motion to approve DCO 106-20 ordinance Z 2078 Maywood Sportsman's Club zoning hearing officer's recommendation to approve a variation to allow 2 pole-mounted advertising signs, a variation to exceed the allowable square foot per space, a variation to exceed the maximum height, variation for the required setback, and a conditional use to utilize electronic display techniques on the advertising signs.
So moved, Hart.
There's a motion by member Hart, second by, who is that? Member Rutledge. Any discussion, questions, comments? Hearing none. Member Hart.
Yeah, just real quick, Paul, the lights are not facing any of the homeowners or are within distance of the homeowners, correct?
That's correct. This property is adjacent to I-294, and the signs and the lights are shielded from the neighbors, and they're directed towards the expressway where the advertising is intended to show people.
Okay, thank you.
Member Ozak, you had a question.
Just to clarify, you said these massive signs, they want 3 times larger than what's allowed. Are they are completely facing 294?
They are. There is an opening in the signs, and it's the opening that is first and foremost adjacent and open to the Sportsman's Club. The neighborhood from the Sportsman's Club is a good distance away. The residential neighborhood is a good distance away on the west side of the Sportsman's Club. But if the neighbors are looking to their east, they will see the opening of the signs, not the signs themselves, and not the lighting of the signs.
Okay. And just to clarify, there was public comment about sound fence. I assume that has nothing to do with this particular petition, so we really can't consider that.
That's correct. One thing that is important to note, however, is that as part of the some of the hardship and practical difficulty in terms of location of these signs, the petitioner has indicated that there is a major reconstruction project for 294, and as part of that, there is going to be some work that's done by the state to put up barriers, and those barriers will mitigate some of the concerns that the neighbor had about the Maywood Sports Club, not associated with the signs. And that's what we heard in the comments today from the neighbor who basically conditionally objected. Their concerns were more with the Sportsman's Club, and that additional wall that's being put up will mitigate the concerns that he had with the Sportsman's Club, not particularly related to the signs.
Okay, thank you.
So my take on the objection and public comment was more about the guns going off than about the signs.
Yeah,
that's correct.
So
and they've been going off for a while. This is not a new club. So okay.
And the sound mitigation isn't related to these signs. So
Yeah.
I just wanted to.
Well, I think that after 10 o'clock noise should be addressed though by the sheriff's department.
Okay, I'm sure it should.
Thanks.
Well, okay. Any further questions, comments? Okay, roll call, please.
Member Chaplin,
Aye.
Member Hart,
Aye.
Member Ozog,
Aye.
Member Rutledge,
Aye.
Chair Tornatori,
Aye, and the motion carries. And finally, well, not finally, but moving on to item N, I'll entertain a motion to approve DCO 107-20 ordinance Z 2079 GIM LLC. This is zoning hearing officer's recommendation to approve a variation to increase the height of a sign, a variation to increase the size of the sign, variation to decrease the east side setback, a variation to reduce distance from the right of way, and a variation to decrease north setback from 20 feet to 7.2, and a conditional use for LED signs to replace existing sign faces, approved by the zoning hearing officer.
So moved, Chaplin.
It's a motion approved by member Chaplin.
Second.
Okay, who is that? One more time.
Second, Ozark.
Seconded by member Ozak. And motion by member Chaplin, seconded by member Ozak. Questions, member Ozak? Yes.
Okay, this is another question for Mr. Haas. Has there been any neighbor input for this particular project?
The village of Willow Park was a participant in the Zoom hearing. The staff had an objection. There's no formal objection that's come in from the village, but the staff had an objection, and it was the zoning hearing officer attributed the objection as a general objection to the fact that in Villa Park, these signs, if they were new, would not be permitted. Recall that this is an existing sign that is paper, and they're going to be changing this existing sign out to electronic. But that was the only concern that came in from anybody, and it came from the staff from the village of Villa Park.
Second question, has there been any consideration of us actually changing our zoning code? Because this is reminding me of a sign I think we approved at 355 in Roosevelt Road. Was that a similar situation where they were replacing paper with LED?
Yes.
I mean, is this really the standard now for these LED signs?
It is.
With it?
What happens is that there are two processes that anybody who is putting up a off-premise advertising sign, which is known as a billboard, have to go through. One is the local jurisdiction, and the other is the state of Illinois. The height, the size, the electronic messaging, and the pixelation and the converter time of 10 seconds are all standards that are set by the state.
State, right, traffic.
And so effectively, the billboard companies follow the state standards, but they have to get local approval before they can go to the state and get the final permits from the state. So this is an industry standard effectively.
And historically, most places would have much smaller sign codes. So, okay, thank you.
But even though Villa Park objected that it would not be approved if it were in Villa Park, it's not in Villa Park.
Right.
Number one. And number two, Paul, correct me if I'm wrong, if Villa Park really wanted an objection, they could have enacted a formal resolution to object, could they not?
That's correct.
Okay, and they did not.
And they did not. And to be clear, well, yeah, they did not. That's
okay. Okay. Any questions, comments further? Okay, there's a motion and a second to approve the zoning hearing officer's approval. Roll call, please.
Member Chaplin.
Aye.
Member Hart.
Aye.
Member Ozark.
Aye.
Member Rutledge. Member Rutledge.
Sheila.
Aye. Sorry.
Secretary.
Aye, and the motion carries. Any old business? Any new business? Okay, we have pulled item 9. We will not be going into executive session. We'll move on to item 10, which is the disposition of executive session minutes per section 2C 21. And I will ask member Chaplin for a motion on this, please.
Yes, I'll move to release and publish the executive session minutes of September 3rd, 2019 and December 3rd, 2019, and to further find that there is an ongoing need to keep the June 27, 2006 minutes confidential and not to publish those minutes.
There's a second to that motion.
Second, Rutledge.
It's a motion and a second. Motion by member Chaplin, a second by member Rutledge. Any discussion? Comments, question? Okay, roll call, please.
Member Chaplin. Member Chaplin.
Liz?
Aye.
There you go.
Member Hart.
Aye.
Aye.
Member Ozark.
Aye.
Member Rutledge.
Aye.
Chair Tornatori.
Aye, and the motion carries. There being no old business, no new business before we adjourn. I don't know what's going to happen in the future, but I hope we're together again on this committee. If we are, that will be great. If we're not, I'm sure our paths will cross in other committees. It's been a pleasure serving with you, and I wish you all well. Be safe, be healthy. We are
Likewise.
adjourned. Without
Thank you,
objection, we are
everybody.
adjourned.
Take
Thank
care.
you.
Take care.
See you this afternoon.
Yes.